Clock News starts now.
This is Q13 News at 8.
We have a child on this site.
I hate the cops. I hate them.
We're all somebody's children out here.
Emotions run high after police march in to clear out CHOP.
Disperse southbound on 12th Avenue or you will be arrested.
A move getting praised by people who feel trapped in their own neighborhood.
It was a really traumatic experience for a lot of us in here.
But occupiers vow their stay isn't over.
CHOP is not just one location, it's not one spot. It's the people, it's the heart of this movement.
This is Q13 News at 8.
Seattle takes back Capitol Hill. The CHOP is gone tonight, but it's only the beginning of a battle for the city to restore the area and reimagine what policing will look like in the city of Seattle. After days of careful planning and practice, officers moved in to clear out CHOP this morning. Thanks for joining us tonight at 8. I'm David Rose.
I'm Aliana Gomez. The next steps now are working to bring officers back into the East Precinct and clean up all the damage left behind. Now, police started their operation at CHOP around 5 this morning. Officers urged protesters to leave and arrested dozens who refused to cooperate after Mayor Jenny Durkan issued an emergency order to clear out the area. Now, the 4 to 6 block area started as the Chaz and evolved into the CHOP, or Capitol Hill organized protest. Thousands of protesters have been occupying the area since early June, demanding police reform and an end to systemic racism after the murder of George Floyd. Calls to end CHOP grew after an uptick in violence over the last couple of weeks and recent shootings, leaving 2 teenagers dead and a third in the hospital.
So it hasn't been a very positive thing. I mean, the message was kind of lost weeks ago. So we just had basically a homeless encampment here and people with no direction. It just was tough to see, and kids getting shot, kids getting killed. Total mayhem.
Seattle police say they've arrested more than 40 people. One of those arrested had a large metal pipe and a kitchen knife. They also say city workers recovered improvised spike strips that are designed to puncture vehicle tires. Chief Carmen Bass says the mayor's order is still in effect for the next 10 days, and people who are not residents or business owners will not be allowed into that area for that time period. In a news conference later this afternoon, Mayor Durkan says the city must now focus on working together with communities to make positive changes in addressing systemic racism.
Undoing centuries of systemic racism will not happen overnight, as I've said before. But I do believe Seattle can lead the way in addressing injustices and ensuring everyone, regardless of their race, can achieve their full potential.
Mayor Durkan says she also plans to meet with the families of shooting victims.
Well, there are a lot of questions about how the city responded to this weeks-long occupation and where the movement goes from here.
Q13 Simone Del Rosario has more on that and the proposals by one senator to make sure this doesn't happen again.
23 days. 23 days protesters occupied these city blocks in the heart of Capitol Hill. 2 days after the second murder around CHOP, police pushed the protesters away from the precinct.
Our job is to support peaceful demonstrations. But what has happened here on these streets over the last 2 weeks, few weeks that is lawless and it's brutal. And bottom line, it is simply unacceptable.
The city leadership sent a message that they not just tolerated this, they encouraged it, even celebrated it in some cases.
State Senator Steve O'Ban says they never should have allowed the occupation in the first place. And he's introducing legislation that would financially penalize cities if it happens again.
I've been deeply embarrassed. We've been the laughingstock of the nation and of the international community. It's intolerable. It cannot happen again.
But on the ground, pushed out of their zone, protesters are standing ground, blocking intersections, disrupting traffic, committed to keeping up pressure.
It's not a building that's going to make us get what we want. It's the people. The people have the rules. The people have their ways of making things happen. And when we come together as a collective voice, people hear us.
As for what's next?
Definitely marching, maybe occupy.
Occupying the space around the East Precinct was never the goal of putting on that pressure, and that pressure does not end when they move back into the building.
But she says she believes what will end is the concern over violence in Black communities.
Those young men are going to migrate back to South Seattle and South King County, where no one cares and no one speaks on what's happening there. They're only speaking on it now because it's happening in a wealthy white area of Seattle, and it can be used for political theater against CHOP.
Disperse southbound.
It may be the final curtain on the East Precinct occupation, but it's not over for the people who spent weeks occupying the space.
Attorney General William Barr released a statement praising Chief Best and the Seattle Police Department on their operation today. It says, quote, Chief Best has rightly committed to continue the substantive discussion while ending the violence which threatens innocent people and undermines the very rule of law principles that the protesters profess to defend.
As many as 40 people with the Seattle Department of Transportation have been restoring the CHOP. Crews began cleaning up the Capitol Hill neighborhood before 7 this morning. They're seen removing concrete barricades, cleaning the traffic signs, painting over all the graffiti, and picking up the trash. SDOT says there's a lot of work ahead, but at least there's a start in restoring some normalcy to that community. People who live and work in and around CHOP say it's about time.
I question why it took them so long to act, and why did they leave us like good tax-paying, law-abiding people just as collateral damage and just ignored us.
It was a really traumatic experience for a lot of us in here. I don't expect people to understand or know it, but just be compassionate about the fact that we've had an experience and understanding that we're going to work through that.
Well, crews with the city's Parks and Recreation are also cleaning Cal Anderson Park and doing landscape maintenance. Parks and Rec and SDOT says they'll be saving some of the art and gardens that developed through CHOP. City says they're working with those artists and gardeners on how to best preserve that work.
Meanwhile, some big questions remain tonight, including are the demonstrations over? And if not, what's to come for other Seattle police facilities? Q13's Steve Kiggins has that part of our coverage tonight.
Seattle police arrived early and in droves to take control of a small portion of Capitol Hill some protesters called CHOP.
Enough is enough.
For weeks, the surrounding streets had been de facto occupied, but city leaders and police insist the recent gun violence had overshadowed their messaging.
The mayor's order makes it clear that this area is off limits at this time.
Right now, and even before the George Floyd protests, we were at below or minimum safe staffing levels in each precinct.
The Seattle Police Officer Union says is proposing programs to reinvent community policing down to each city's neighborhood. But since City Council has banned their use of some crowd control measures like tear gas and rubber bullets, future conflicts could be worse.
If we don't have that tool, then the only option to keep people back is our batons, our hands, and our service weapons.
Chief Best said the department has not heard about threats against other department facilities, but said staffing would be beefed up as needed. The West Precinct, inside Seattle's Denny Triangle neighborhood, isn't too far from Capitol Hill, but some demonstrators leaving CHOP this morning said it matters not where they protest, it's that their message needs to spread.
They just looked at me and told me that CHOP isn't here anymore because they thought they just walked through here. I want you guys to send this message and come out here and help me send this message to them that CHOP is not just one location, it's not one spot. It's the people, it's the heart of this movement.
That was Steve Kiggins reporting. Chief Best says she supports Black Lives Matter and peaceful demonstrations and looks forward to engaging with city leaders and others to re-envision what public safety looks like. And we'll continue to follow the latest developments with CHOP. You can see more of our coverage about the police operation and steps moving forward on Q13Fox.com.
Let's take a look at your forecast outside, and we've had a little bit of dampness early and then kind of a mix through the day, but it's still very pleasant.
Yeah, the big weather story is when is the June gloom going to go away? It's following us into this July 1st, and we're definitely feeling more like fall or January, that is. If we look across I-90, you can see it looks a little misty and drizzly out there. Same at the coast, same down to the Tacoma Narrows, and we're looking back at the Ship Canal Bridge where traffic's moving along just fine. Looking back towards the U District, you are 61 degrees outside right now. So the sun's going down in just about 1 hour from now at 9:10, and we're seeing the air quality out there good. And thankfully for our allergy sufferers, the weeds and the trees are down to low levels. We're looking at a few sprinkles, though, backing off the I-5 corridor, and that's kind of our story that we're seeing these showers still persist each and every day. As we get going, the winds have picked up just a bit this evening. We've had some gusts out of Shelton, about 22 or 24 miles an hour. And again, temperatures will start to fall off into the upper 50s to low 60s for the next hour or so. Tomorrow looks like we'll see a little bit better of a day, but still much of the same. Almost 70 degrees, so we warm up a bit. I'll get that extended forecast and the Futurecast showing you just when the rain will stop.
The Seahawks will now only have 2 preseason games this year. According to multiple reports, the NFL has decided to cancel 2 of the 4 preseason games for all 32 teams. Sports Director Aaron Levine shows us how much this has to do with the rising number of COVID cases around the U.S.
There's definitely some concern there, especially among the players, which we'll get to in a second. But then again, the league has been discussing this for the last few weeks, even before the increased number of positive cases around the country. Now, in the Seahawks case specifically, it means their home preseason game against the Raiders on August 13th and their last preseason game in Minnesota on September 3rd would be canceled. The Hawks would still play at Houston on Saturday, August 22nd, and home against the Chargers on Thursday, August 27th. Now, the main reason is that it gives teams more ramp-up time and adjustment time given the cancellation of in-person mini camps and OTA workouts this offseason. I asked Pete Carroll about the possibility of canceling preseason games last month.
The question is, how would that change things in terms of the lead up to the regular season compared to past years?
I think the number one thing that it changes is the opportunity for the young guys to show themselves. You know, when a young guy gets hurt, it really hinders him more so than an experienced player. And that's because he misses the time of developmental time. So if that was to take place, even though I'm extremely impressed with our young guys and how they have learned and they've applied themselves up to this point, but still there just might not be enough time to really give them the chance, you know, so you might be behind in that area a little bit.
Now, there is another wrinkle here. According to the NFL Network, the NFL Players Association has not yet signed off on this plan, and some union leaders are questioning whether it's smart to play any preseason games at all. There is a call scheduled for the Players Board of Representatives tomorrow, but for now, at least, we can say that games 1 and 4 of the preseason are expected to be canceled. As far as training camp goes, it's still scheduled to start July 28th when the players report to camp. Back to you.
Well, pause on reopening is now a reality for some in our state as COVID cases continue to rise.
Next, the latest county to pump the brakes on moving forward.
And with a holiday weekend in sight, getting out of town may not be an option either. I'm Brian Flores in the newsroom. What nearby states are doing to keep people safe after a spike in COVID cases.
And the new threat from President Trump that it could impact negotiations on Capitol Hill as officials monitor potential threats to monuments across the country.